and it wasn't necessarily venture funding. It was more a bootstrap maneuver. But one of our companies in the early days had a founder who was getting booked for regular speaking engagements, but it was all kind of inbound, and she was uncomfortable with putting herself out there as a paid speaker. So what she decided to do was really create an alter ego, and she would pretend she was her booking agent when people would send in emails or call her. And so she'd be like, yeah, can't speak for anything less than $25,000. And they'd be like, oh, okay. Whereas she herself would have never felt comfortable asking those kind of rates. And that's how they wound up bootstrapping the company and then made their way. Once they once they bootstrapped it, they demonstrated enough traction and momentum that then they were able to go out and raise a round from more traditional investors. But that never would have happened if she hadn't to come up with that little hack to make it viable for her to get funding.
Awesome. Uh, Thanks. I call Lily big sister because her startup is slightly mature than the challenge startups. But Lily, could you also sorry.
Buddha, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. So Lily, if you could also share a little bit about what Jack is and what you're doing, and then Jack, later we could also hear a little bit about Qkey, because I think it's also awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much. No, I really appreciate it. So yeah, hi, I'm Lily Elsner. I'm CEO and co-founder of Jack Fertility, which is the world's first postal sperm test. So allowing people with sperm to send in their sample from home and then get really actionable, understandable results to take the next step to improve their sperm health. And really, our vision with this is to be able to preempt the sort of massive decline in sperm that we're seeing across the world. Sperm count's down about 60% over the last 50 years. And so we really want to make sure that people are understanding this in a really taboo space. And so to sort of bring in where my question is, so we've been trying to leverage different aspects of AI in tackling something that is so taboo. And so we've actually partnered with another large tech company that you can probably imagine who, to create, and who has a very generous startups AI credits program. But we've developed an AI chatbot that basically we took off the security, some of the security and guardrails around language that you can use, basically to allow people to ask kind of their crudest questions. Because we know, especially, I mean, even in the name Jack, it's a bit cheeky. It's a bit something that people want to get a joke out. And frankly, I don't love having to answer all those questions myself and my team. So actually, AI has been a really interesting use case to allow people to have sort of an anonymous way of asking those questions, but getting the right answers in terms of that Gen AI and the chatbot feature. But basically what we have is that was kind of the initial goal and objective that we built that. And now there's so much that we could do with that data. And then at the same time, we're developing a data lake with not only our results, but again, so much of the information about how people relate based on what their fertility goals are. So for example, somebody who's actively trying to conceive might be very, very different from somebody who's just thinking about, their sperm health is maybe in like their early 20s, doesn't plan on having children for another 10 years. And really, I just wanted to pick your brain and kind of share that with everybody on the call and sort of just get people's thoughts, and particularly yours, Rick, around what are things that we could be thinking about, especially with all the innovations happening in the next couple of months, to leverage some of that data, because that's where we are, is we have so much cool stuff that we could do, and just really kind of overwhelmed by not only the data that we have, but the possibilities.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I really appreciate just your comfort level in discussing the topic. Like I worked with a founder here in town who was working on a non-hormonal solution for vaginal dryness. And one of the ways that she really, excelled was just leaning into like, this is going to be awkward and uncomfortable. We're going to talk about it. And she was really well received in that regard. I think to your question, like I started where my original startup I worked for was in digital healthcare, and we amassed large sets of data. We had physicians who were analyzing that data, trying to find trends and those kind of things. I think the difficulty with the world of technology is we've consistently lived with this promise of data being something of value, right? Like that's what we went public on, was like, look, we have all this healthcare data. It's going to be amazing. We're going to be able to project and have informaticists and blah, blah, blah. And it's never really come to fruition. So I think what I would encourage you to do is just be as experimental as you can with the data. Like, don't be too precious about, like, this was our idea for accumulating this data, and take more creative approaches to what might even be available there. I think the beauty of where we are now, specifically with things like AI, is given AI and its not perfect hallucination type of environment, even having AI analyze some aspects of the data may cause you to come up with some interesting ideas that the founding team would have never considered. But I think, again, it's like you need to be comfortable as a founder going where the market tells you to go. So I think it's make some guesses, test drive some stuff, and there may be some potential opportunities that you never realized there. Or you may find that people start using the tool, the chatbot, in ways you never expected. And please be open to following those paths that the market is taking you now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really
Yeah, of
appreciate
course.
that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Next, we're going to have Tessa, then Simon, then Jonathan.
Hi. So my question's really around kind of the marketing side of things and how you can make something memorable. So, for example, Lily just said about her brand is called Jack. And the minute you explained what it was, I was like, yeah, that's going to stick with me. That just lodged in there instantly. And I was like, well, what an awesome way of doing it. And even things like when you hear that, boom, you kind of know that I'm doing Netflix, right? And with our brand, with our marketing, at the moment, our company is called Cricket. And we kind of came up with it as a little cricket, a Jiminy cricket that sits on your shoulder and is a conscious AI, like we're being conscious. But the minute I say cricket to everyone, they're always really disappointed that we're not talking about the sport. And we're actually talking about a company. Yeah, exactly. You were like, oh, she's nailed it with sports, and I haven't. So basically, it's a company that is able to provide essay feedback. So Cambridge Standard feedback on essays at quite a high standard. And so students can get that feedback, teachers can get that feedback, and then they can then have basically a personal tutor alongside of them. And so that's kind of what we wanted to do, is create an in-house supervisor, really. So that's kind of Cricket in a nutshell. But obviously, the issue is I don't we're coming up with different words and different names. And one of them was the magical essay marking tool, and I was like, that just sounds rubbish, and it just doesn't sound like Jack, for example. So could you give any kind of advice or tips on how I could possibly make something which is memorable? And obviously you were saying about the Coca-Cola and things, so yeah, I'm really interested in what's the most memorable things that you've seen, how do people make this, and kind of that's where I'm at.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's a good thing that question wasn't the prompt for this presentation, because I have 175 slide 3-hour presentation on branding for startups that you never want to sit through. It's awful, but let's condense it into something more more concise for you given this question. So I think first and foremost, the most important thing to remember, especially for folks who may not come from the marketing or advertising world, is, to your point, Tessa, brand is every sensory environment. It's not just a logo type, it's not just a color, it's not just a name, it's how people engage with your company. And much to your point, on the Jack front, like what you're trying to do with marketing is convince people to make illogical decisions. You don't want them making decisions based on what they know, objectively what makes sense. It's you want your target market to pay $300 for a pair of trainers because they happen to have a swoosh on them. Like that does not make sense in any shape or form. So I think the most important thing is, again, like I think you need to be honest with yourself. Like, is Cricut causing too much confusion? Is there a rebrand that needs to take place there? A lot of the work I used to do at early stage startups was asking that very question. Like, does this name make sense? Like, is it too confusing? Can people spell it easily? Is the URL of it? Like all that kind of stuff. So again, back to my please try not to be precious. That, like it might be one of those things where it's just like, we called it this, but it's not really the right thing for it. But also just encourage you to create, we call them personas, like create pictures of your ideal user and like every single facet of that person's personality, where they live, where they exist, where they're going to encounter your product, all those things. And that may help you kind of hone in on facets of the brand that may be more important than another, right? Like it makes no sense for Netflix to replace that bing bong with the huge thing of text that somebody has to read through, because that doesn't further their brand. So I think it's always back to kind of user discovery, customer discovery, figuring out where they live and breathe, and then starting to figure out how do you make your brand unique in that environment. And then this is a throwaway, but like just anecdotally, I had a great deal of success being like counter to what the popular marketing things happening were, like and specifically from like a giveaways tchotchkes standpoint. Like I would tend to come up with like things that almost seemed retro or old school, and those would stand out more than trying to compete with everybody who's doing the AI blah blah simultaneously. You're looking for ways to just kind of like make it unique, and it's not easy. Like this takes a lot of work, and unfortunately it's yet another hat you have to wear as a founder to figure that stuff out. But I think you're already way down the right path. Like your head is in the right space. It's just keep thinking about customers and how they engage, and I'm sure it'll come to you the way to kind of uniquely deal with that. Like I I'll give you another example. So my organization is called PI. It's an acronym, but everybody just refers to it as PI. So a huge part of our brand is everything is pie puns. Like when we were funding organizations, it was called Pie Dough. When we were like creating, our classes, they're all named after a flavor of pie. So it's like apple pie, blueberry pie, what was coconut cream pie. Like so that's a very big part of our brand, and kind of shows some of that levity that we try and bring to education for startups, but also as a way of people remember what people are like, oh yeah, I was in apple pie. And I'm like, why do you even remember that? That was like 15 years ago. But it just creates some affinity in a unique way. So I encourage you to kind of dig into that and look for those opportunities. Does that help?
Yeah, that really does. Thank you so much. And
Cool.
yeah, we're definitely not gonna stick down the Cricut route. I think that we're gonna have to like rename it, because like everyone's face drops. So yeah, that was amazing. Thank you so much. That
Yeah, of
really did
course.
help. Thank you.
Yeah. And just another heads up, in the US, there's a Cricut Wireless too, which is a pretty known brand in the US as well.
So we next have Simon. Simon,
Okay.
if
Is
I
my
think
sound
if you
working?
could also introduce. Yes, it's working. If you could also introduce yourself and your startup.
Okay, well, so my name is Simon Sällström. I did a master's in economics at Oxford, focusing a lot on development, labor markets, behavioral economics. And so what my startup does is we identify top talents in low-income countries, starting in Africa, and provide them with world-class education, laptops, and all support they need to enter remote work in tech. And in the longer run, enabling other stakeholders to support them on this journey. So invest in the talents, applying something akin to what you do in the creative industries, like talent agents, but for tech. Now, my question is very practical because I was speaking with an investor recently who mentioned that you shouldn't have too many small ticket angel investors, and they said, well, you can, no matter who you think who you think they are, people change and they can become pain in the ass. You can handle maybe one or two, and I asked, okay, but how? Like, what could happen? Like, surely if you can, maybe you can shield that. Maybe you can come up with a contract or a side letter, and I don't know what. But like, in what ways are they pains in the ass? And the answer that I got was, well, people can be very creative in how they become that. So he didn't give me any answer. So I'm like, I'm still not sure what's really the cost of taking on a lot of small check angels. I think there's always trade-offs. There are probably benefits to doing that too, but I'd love to hear your view on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, great question. I think, first and foremost, just from a purely like fundraising standpoint, like having a lot of people on your cap table early is going to be off-putting to future investors because of that reaction you received. Like future investors and be like, I don't want to deal with all of these people. So like a lot of, if you continue down this path, you may want to reach a point where you do what they call cleaning up the cap table. You either like get the group of investors to organize under a single LLC or something along those lines, just so it's one line item and not a list of 10 people. So that's one thing that jumps to mind whenever I hear a lot of folks on the cap table that can be a problem for founders. In terms of how people can be problematic, it's there it's really two ends of the spectrum that I've seen. First and foremost, it's the investor who put in 5,000 pounds and is emailing you every single day for an update on what's going on with the company. What are the metrics? Have you done this? I asked you to do that. Have you talked to so and so? Blah, blah, blah. And they just ride you constantly, even though, like, it, in the big picture, it's a pittance of what they've given you to build your business, but they continue to annoy you with needing constant updates. The best way to get ahead of that is get into a cadence of providing monthly updates to all of your investors so that that kind of derails that activity. Like they'll feel more informed, they'll feel less concerned about what's happening. The other side is the people who just give you a check and then disappear. And the problem with those people is then there's the potential that somebody else sees their name on the cap table and goes to them and says, tell us about this company. And they're like, I don't really know anything about that, and that makes it look worse for your company because they're like, well, shouldn't you be excited about what they're doing? Shouldn't you be informed about what they're doing? So those are the two sides of the spectrum. But if you create a regular cadence of communication, that solves for both of those, right? They'll always know what's going on with your company and they'll feel more comfortable with what's going on with your company. And then I think the third one, and this may not be the case for you, but I often see people get into this situation, especially in kind of a friends and family fundraising mode, is you have investors on your cap table who are not very experienced or mature investors, and they can just be a pain to deal with on a regular basis. Like any angel on your cap table should be just as comfortable taking that check and setting it on fire with the idea that they're never going to get that money back. Like that's how they should be thinking about that investment. It's not even to the point of being a lottery ticket. It's just, hey, Simon, I like you. I believe in you. I think what you're doing is on the right track. Here's some money to help you figure that out. And if I get it back, great. If I don't, no big deal. Like those are the most ideal kind of angels that you want to attract. Because yeah, you should not be, given all you're doing as a founder, you should not also be in the role of educating an angel on how to be an angel. Like that's not, you shouldn't be taking on that educational hurdle as well. Does that help, Simon?
Yeah, I think it helps. But on the last point, by how to be an angel, is that like the things that you said that bad angels do? Like teach them not to do that, or I mean,
I'm saying like if you can avoid that at all costs,
yeah.
please do. If you're in a situation where you're having to do some of that education, it's so in the last 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
angel investing has changed drastically. So what angels used to be when I started in startups were very much like they were what they were described as. They were just like, here's a check. Go do your thing. I don't need a lot of like due diligence. I don't know. I just like, I like you, go get them. And then as time went on, we had, you know, so and so becoming a billionaire by being an angel investor in Uber or Twitter or what have you. And now the dynamic of angels has become much more like structured, diligence based. Like there are a lot of angels are a lot more careful about how they invest and where they contribute capital. And so there are ways for people to learn how to be angel investors. I'm encouraging you not to take that on, but if you do have an angel investor who you feel like is valuable to the company but doesn't have a lot of experience here, then I think it's just a matter of helping them understand how to engage effectively and talking to them about what they want to hear from you as the founder to keep them up to date with the business and their investment.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
but a lot of it's just communication. Like communication fixes a
Okay.
lot of stuff.
Oh, okay. That's great. That's great. Are we gonna talk through the slides or not at all? Or
No, probably not, but I will drop in I've got a link here that you will cover the
because I
data
saw
we
the
had.
yeah, I saw the slides and I was interested in. I just didn't understand how you did the dollar or like there's a cost of different meetings
Oh
and
yeah,
it should be
let's talk through that. So the idea there was as a founder who doesn't generally have a lot of time or money, like you should be conscious of venues you're picking to meet mentors because more often than not you'll wind up paying the bill for wherever you are. So like
Mm.
if you're really strapped for cash, I highly encourage avoiding dinners or happy hours or those kind of things and stick more to like the in-office meeting or the coffee meeting, tea meeting, something that's more affordable from a founder
Right.
perspective. So you're not winding out, shelling out, 200 pounds for a meeting that wound up being a dinner meeting. So it's just being conscious that you need to be very disciplined in your decision making around the environment you're meeting mentors in.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. So next we're going to have Jack.
Mute. You're on mute, I
Muted.
think.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, so I'm Jack. There's been some pretty interesting questions about, for example, how to handle data and how to do branding that I'm actually, I find kind of important because I'm working on a automated cookie startup. I'm design customized cookies on the fly based on a user's preference, and then use a specialized 3D printing system I've developed to print them out and bake them whenever someone wants it. And it's really cool and it's really fascinating, but the long-term implications are really having to do with the market research data you can gather from such high levels of customization that normally aren't quite attainable. And a lot of my ideas are focused on information-based models that tell me how much information a given cookie is going to give me about the demographics of a certain user. And all this kind of comes together with this cool long-term idea of a customized food platform where you can give people data and say, hey, if you're trying to customize some sort of food, let's say you're doing a new burger joint or something, and you want to know what sort of things you should offer and what things should be paired together, we can help. However, I think the problem is that the short-term vision and the long-term vision are very separate. The short term is I am giving people cookies. I am Willy Wonka. I am putting on a suit and I am going out and saying, hey guys, let's make the world a sweeter place. But the long term is much more, here's a spreadsheet and a bunch of data that I've gathered and I'm showing you a bunch of correlations. And I'm having problems trying to unify those two ideas together into something cohesive in my communication as I'm raising funding. Do you have any suggestions?
Great question. And I love that I, I was actually just reading an article today. Like, I love that you're high and low. You're like thinking strategically, visionary about this future, and you're low on the ground, tactically shoving cookies in people's faces. I also find it quite humorous that you're talking about cookies in a way that very much mimics the online version of cookies. So all that's super interesting. The thing, and with apologies to all my friends at Microsoft, like, I refer to this as books for Amazon. Like, the issue you're trying to think through is not how to tell the entire story. You're trying to figure out how to tell that story that is just interesting enough and just far enough along to be an interesting business concept that other people understand. The two facets of that business problem is it has to be big enough to be interesting, but not so big that it's insurmountable or unattainable, or people believe that you can't get there. And why I use the analogy books for Amazon is because when Bezos was out pitching Amazon originally, he wasn't talking about the largest e-commerce platform in the world. He was talking about, we're going to be the largest bookstore in the world. And everybody was like, well, okay, you know more about the internet. None of the existing bookstores are going to beat you in that game. Like, people who were really thoughtful about it were like, oh, that's interesting. You can figure out supply chain issues. You can figure out all this kind of stuff using books, which aren't a critical need, so that maybe you can move into other industries in the future. But I think the most compelling part of that method of storytelling is the fact that I would imagine that inevitably, every time he pitched that, someone would ask the question of like, well, if you can sell books online, couldn't you sell DVDs or CDs online? And then they're hooked, right? Like, they're part of the story. And you'd be like, wow, that's really interesting. I never thought of that. Let's talk through what you think that might look like. Like, you've suddenly got engagement. And so I think that's your challenge, is like figuring out where, forgive the pun, but as I said with pie, you have to figure out the sweet spot for where that story is, and really just kind of hone in on that. And as challenging as it is for a founder, you have to keep part of the story secret. Like, you can't reveal part of it. Like, it's like watching a thriller and they, reveal the whole plot within the first couple minutes. You're not going to watch the rest of the movie. So you need to kind of bring them along in your storytelling. And the other part is, it changes depending on who you're telling the story to, right? If I'm talking to Autodesk, who's a partner of ours with Pi, I'm going to lean into the 3D printing because that's what they're interested in. Like, that's their whole thing. Whereas if I'm talking to somebody in the food industry, I'm going to lean into more customization, how this is interesting, those kind of details. So yeah, again, there are no easy or right answers. I would just encourage you to figure out like how much of that story you need to tell before it becomes too convoluted or it seems too big to accomplish.
I really appreciate that. And thanks for the point about the internet cookies, because I have actually been thinking about going through a rebranding, and internet cookies is something that has been brought up to me at least 7 times now.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, and it's I've seen a number of pursuits in this regard, but never with the 3D printing. So I'm in Portland, Oregon, which is on the west coast of the US. We had one company that was hot cookie delivery, like late at night, and then we now have some more kind of like retail brick and mortar establishments that do that. But the most interesting part about them to me is they don't run during what you would expect to be normal retail hours. Like they don't open till 8 p.m. and they stay open till 3 a.m. as a retail environment. So people poking around on this issue, but I've never seen quite that angle. So I'm really excited to see where this goes.
Thanks so much. So next I'm going to ask Josh to share his question, and then Ushnish, and then we have a question from Richard.
Hey Rick, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts on how to grow in the startup ecosystem. So I have quite a focused question on maybe some thoughts on like no-code code gen platforms. So stuff like Bolt, Lovable, Codev. And so these platforms, they must have a heap of data on the various projects and builders that are building on these on these platforms. And also like maybe what are some of these promising startups that are likely to succeed. So if you were seeding these projects, what are some data points or maybe some heuristics that you would look at? And is there any way to make sort of like data-driven conclusions on what founders are likely to succeed on these platforms? It could be like user engagement on some of these SaaS products that are being built as well. And say you were creating like an accelerator program for one of these code gen platforms, right? Like, is it worth to do so? And what are some of the challenges that you see?
Yeah, great question. So with the caveat that I usually only deal with very early stage companies, like they're usually pre-funding, pre-product market fit. So that's kind of where my head is. Like I would never provide advice for like a Series A investor because they have a much better barometer for what success means at that stage. But at the stage I deal with, specifically at the accelerator stage, it really has nothing to do with the product or the technology. It's all about the people. It's really the founders. And like, again, back to that, are the founders like so dead set on bringing a particular product to fruition that they don't think about the business they're trying to build? That's one of the questions we always ask our founders is like, do you want this product to exist, or are you trying to build a business? And if building that business means killing this product that you love so much, are you willing to do that? Because that may very well be the case of what you need to go through. So much of what I'm analyzing on or determining for potential future success is the founder, their personality, the founding team, how they like. We will do things in startup interviews for the accelerator where we'll ask the CEO a very technical question. And if that CEO doesn't hand it off to the CTO as their area of expertise to answer the question, then that's a red flag for us. We're like, you need to respect one another's roles. You need to understand who knows what and how things are going. And in terms of data, I would say if you could get at data that was either could reveal some of that personality of the founders, or if you could get at some of the dynamics of like how their product has changed or how feature sets have changed as they've engaged with the market, then I think you may be able to get at some of that programmatically. But by and large, it's a lot of kind of emotional quotient kind of questions that you're asking people and engaging with founders. And I think the other challenge with the accelerator work is sometimes that payoff is not with the current company. And I'll just provide another anecdote. We had a founder in our first class who it was great. Like, this is how long ago it was. This startup launched on when Google Drive launched, and Google Drive originally thought they were going to be this app store and have all kinds of apps on it. And they were one of the first apps to launch on Google Drive. They were part of the announcement and all that kind of stuff. And it just didn't work. Like, it completely fizzled out. That founder shut down their startup, joined another startup from their cohort as the lead developer, built out their product, wound up being one of the most successful exits in our community, then went on to found another startup that had a successful exit and is now on to co-founding his third startup. And so, but that initial accelerator experience could be seen as a failure, but I see it as a success because we engaged with that founder and he had the right kind of personality to do this work over time. So the fact that we convinced him to stop wasting his time on that product that was never going to work, even though Google helped them launch it, it was a huge win from my perspective.
Really good. So would you say like focus on, I mean, of course, like the projects, they come and they go, but like the people, is that what you're really, really looking at?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, exactly.
Much.
Yeah.
Next, Ushnish from Squish.
Yeah. Hi, Rick. Thank you for doing this session with us. So my question is around go-to-market. So, we're Squish. We're developing tools to make AI workflows faster and cheaper. So we have this like instant like input compressor that we're selling to AI companies. And our problem is, so it works fairly well when we like go to these, industry events and demos, and in person we explain what the product is, and people come up to us and there's interest. But most of our customers are not here in the UK; they are in the US. So most of the AI companies are in the US. So this means that a lot of our, outbound has to be like cold emails. But at the moment, it seems like cold email and or LinkedIn messages it's like this, arms race of AI bots out competing each other. So in this environment, how would you suggest that we, refine our outbound strategy for cold email or cold outreach?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, it's it's tough. But you have the folks generating the cold emails via AI, and now you have AI dealing with the cold emails, and you basically just got like AI competing with one another to get through that door. I would encourage you to again think maybe scale and quantity isn't the issue. Maybe like doing some depth of research and doing some more like quality engagements could be the way. Like, look at if I were in your situation, and again, data point of one, this is not necessarily correct. I'm just saying if I was tasked with solving this issue, I would look again to the personas or to customers who had been successful with the solution or seemed to understand the solution, and partner with them to build case studies or papers or those kind of things, or presentations, excuse me, that I could then go to a small handful of other potential customers, even if that meant taking on the cost and time commitment of traveling to the US to meet with them in person. Like, I would be doing a lot of research to figure that kind of stuff out. But at this stage, nothing beats like customer discovery and getting a better understanding of what resonates with those folks. And that might require some in-person time from you. You could probably handle it virtually, but there's so much like body language, like dynamic you miss in virtual meetings that I would just, rather than thinking that you need to go after a target market of tens of thousands of people, I would hone it down to the smallest incremental target market that cannot live without your solution, even if that's just a handful of people, and start there. Because the most important thing with that pursuit is if I'm a future investor in your company and you've proven to me that you know how to like dominate a market, no matter how small that market is, I know you can incrementally build from there to continue to attract more people from other markets. So again, long story short, I'd go quality over quantity on this one until you figure out the right messaging.
Thank you, Rick. That was very helpful.
Good. Yeah, for sure.
Philip, would you mind if I built on Ushnish's question and what Rick said? Okay, cool. So, Rick, like you were talking about 0 to 1, essentially, right? Dominating a single market. And within that example that Ushnish shared, how would you balance between the early stage incoming funnel, which is from the US, or potentially going somewhere closer, like either being localized or somewhere closer? How would you recommend one navigates that at the early stage?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a research question, really. Like I feel like right now, personally, I don't have enough data to go on. Like I don't understand enough. And but if like dive deep and you may figure out, to your point, Uday, that like, oh, we thought it was all US folks, but there's actually, German companies that are really focused on this and don't require as much to get in front of. They're not getting as much noise. Or the other place that I always love, the investment community always loves, is really boring industries that may not even be online. Like they may not even be reachable by LinkedIn. They may be people you have to go meet in person or dial up on the phone. But yeah, I think it all comes down to whether it's customers or investors or what have you. Most founders don't do enough research before engaging. Like research is so critical, and there's so many valuable assets just online to help you build out kind of profiles and personas and of everybody. Like that's research is the hardest part of this whole thing, being a founder, because you have been inspired by your best guess. And then once you've made your best guess, you don't get to guess anymore. You need to do research to figure out what you need to do next.
Thanks so much, Rick. Philip, all yours.
Thanks so much, Rick. I'm Philip. Really excellent so far. I've got a question. So for context, I'm sort of very early days working on a startup with 2 other people. And obviously you've got a lot of experience in that area. I wonder what's your sort of advice for people who are potentially sort of looking to do that sort of full-time in the future? What sort of fundraising routes do you sort of suggest? Do you have any advice for areas to stay clear of? And, just sort of how do sort of early stage people do it? And what's your experience been with that?
Yeah, great question. Early stage is a lot harder now than it's ever been before. And it's odd because it's probably easier than it's ever been to build a product. It's not easy, but it's easier than it's ever been, and it's more scalable than it's ever been. And then at the same time, given broader macroeconomic trends, it's harder and harder to unlock capital to build those things. So in this day and age, no one's going to give you money for your idea. Like you got to have a product, you've got to have a thing, you've got to be showing traction. So I always encourage founders, like, don't quit your day job. Like do as much as you can while you're getting paid to do work, like if it's nights and weekends or whatever. Like don't make that leap too early, because the capital is not out there until the product exists and until you have customers who are using that product. The other thing I would encourage you to think about is, again, it's back to quantity versus quality. Is the freemium model was kind of a myth. Like the freemium model got a bunch of non-users on your platform for free that didn't really demonstrate how the product was designed to work. So start charging people sooner rather than later. Like create a cost for them to use the product. If they truly find value in it, they will continue to pay for it. And that's really going to be your deciding factor on who is my target market and what type of product should we be building for them. That cost barrier will help filter folks out for you.
Awesome, thank you. That's really useful.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm just going to ask Richard's question because he's not with us anymore. But his question was, you had previously mentioned comment about telling founders if their idea will not work. When should we, as founders, know our ideas will never work?
That's a really good question. I am one of those kind of kill your darlings kind of people where it's just like if it's there's certain factors, there are market factors, market dynamics that can dictate sooner rather than later whether your product has potential. There are personal factors. One of the companies I founded, we kept adding features to this product based on market response until basically I got to the point that I hated the product that we had built and I didn't even want to use it. So I couldn't figure out why anyone else would want to use it. And that was the right time to kill that product and that company. Everybody has a different kind of like, that's it, this is all I can take, this isn't working. Everybody has different kind of lines in the sand for that kind of activity, and there's no surefire way to do it. The best way to go about it is to be really honest with yourself as a founder, really honest with your founding team, and establishing some of those milestones at the outset when everybody's still happy, when you're still thinking everything's going to go great, when you're super passionate about pursuing this problem or this product, and establishing what success looks like. Like, what does success look like in a month? What does success look like in 3 months? What does it look like in a year? And starting to establish some of those milestones to help you guide your progress to say, what makes me want to keep doing this? What makes me think we're on the right path? But also establish some milestones where it's like, what tells us it's not working? Like, what tells us we're on the wrong path, and be on the lookout for those as well. And it's not fun. Like, it's not fun to spend a bunch of time on something and come to the conclusion that it's not going to work. But building a product or a business that nobody is going to pay for is called a hobby. Just keep it as a hobby. Like, you don't have to make everything into a business. You can build a product that's amazing that is like not your day-to-day life. So it's just a matter of like being really thoughtful yourself about what you're hoping to get out of this. And it could be learning, it could be building a business, it could be trying to build a product, but just establish some success milestones that help you gauge whether you're on the right path or whether it's time to stop wasting time and money on something.
Thanks so much, Rick. Next we have Carly. Hey, Carly.
Hi, yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Rick. I really appreciate it. Forgive me if I'm repeating an earlier question. I actually was just able to sign on. I just learned about this from Uday, like in the moment. But you mentioned something very interesting, which was at one point in time on your founder journey with one of the companies you started, you added too many features too fast. It got confusing, overwhelming, and it became a product that was no longer usable or interesting. I'm curious about your perspective on launching with an MVP, because I've often gotten a lot of advice about you really want to have user input pretty immediately. You want to have that feedback loop so that you can iterate correctly and know if you're hitting the right pain points. But at the same time, a lot of us are kind of perfectionists, have a broader vision, want to achieve something bigger than is encapsulable in an MVP. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on to what extent should you launch with like a very rudimentary product?
Yeah, that's again, great question. And again, I'll answer it with it's changed over time. Like, I think the prevailing mythology in startups is if you're not embarrassed by the first thing you launched, then you waited too long, right? Like, but fact of the matter is that was true 10, 12 years ago. Every user today has experienced some of the best UX, UI in any product anywhere, and they have a much higher bar for what their expectations are. So I'm a little less like resistant to that kind of perfection or that kind of ideal situation when you're trying to launch an MVP. So like I think you have to get product out there as soon as you're comfortable that it's the right product, like, and even if it's not solving the entire issue, even if it's just the first step, you need to get it out there as quickly as you can. The the benefit of that is, yeah, you start getting that user feedback. You may realize like, oh, we're on the wrong path, like our target market's actually over there, not over there, and we need to retool to figure those kind of things out. But one thing I always advise founders to do, and this is especially people when they're still at the ideation phase, is work to build that customer base before you write even one line of code. And people are like, how do you do that? Well, like start a newsletter that attracts the target market you're wanting to talk to. Start an Instagram or TikTok that like speaks to that target market. What you want to do is start aggregating that community ahead of any product release so that you can start to understand what their wants, needs, and desires are without having to commit that to code ahead of time. So, and the other benefit of that is if you decide that you want to go down the venture capital path, walking into an investor and saying, we have an Instagram account with 100,000 followers, and this is the product we're working on. Like that immediately increases confidence for them. They're like, oh, you know how to develop traction with your target market. I'm more comfortable that you will be able to do that with the product as well. But look for, and again, it's kind of looking for a sweet spot. It's like, look for the ways that you or your founding team enjoy expressing yourselves, and then create something on an existing platform using that form of expression that attracts your target market. And then you've kind of got your research group right there. You can kind of go to them with things and be like, hey, what do you think about this? Or you can highlight other products in the market and see what their feedback on those products are. It just gives you a research group to kind of test things with before you have to put actual product out in the market.
Great idea. Thanks.
Yeah.
Any last questions? I have a burning question, kind of, but if anyone else wants to go, I would. Here we go, Raphael, you can go for it.
Oh, hello. Thank you so much. It's very interesting. I work for a Series A startup at the moment, and I've had various ideas, including that I've done in hackathons. But I was wondering what you think of the idea of starting something as an open source product and then monetizing it later and building the community. Because like the company that I work for builds a database, and until like a month ago you couldn't pay for it, but we've managed to get a lot of users. But I think we were very lucky that we went kind of viral within certain communities and got a lot of people quickly. But do you think that's a good strategy in general?
Yeah, great question. Portland for a long time was a huge hub of open source activity, so I've been really close to some of that. Linus Torvalds lives here. Ward Cunningham, who invented the wiki, lives here. Like, so we have good exposure to some of that activity. I would say first and foremost, there's a masterclass on what not to do going on with Matt Mullenweg and Automatic and WordPress right now. So please keep tabs on that because that's awful. So,
oh my God.
And then Mastodon's doing some interesting stuff as well. For the quick Microsoft plug, GitHub has an accelerator program focused on open source projects that may be of interest to you, which is super interesting. And I've got some good friends who work there. They're great people. But I would say there are plenty of ways to monetize an open source project in a meaningful way. My advice to you from my perspective is just have clear clear divisions between what is open source, what is community maintained, how that's guided, like what the foundation does to support that project, and what the proprietary for-profit organization does, and don't blur the lines between those. Because when it comes back to like brand and like trust of what you're building and what your product is designed to do, you need the division of church and state there. And but I think it's totally viable. I mean, I think it's a great way. It's just running an open source project and managing a community that contributes to that project is a wholly different business than monetizing that. And so it's just it's challenging, but not insurmountable.
Yeah, well, I suppose there's also like the kind of source available where, like it's on GitHub, you can go and see it. Like you could do a PR, but most people don't. But it's kind of, I suppose, doing it out in the open. But I think there's a lot of cautionary tales. I'm just thinking of like Redis and Mongo and Elastic.
Yeah. Well, and another good one to keep an eye on is Blue Sky. Like it's not open source per se, but I mean it has aspects of it that are open and allow for unique building. And we have a company here in town where, so Blue Sky, if folks aren't familiar with Blue Sky, it's kind of Twitter-esque, but it's more designed to be free and open, and like the old days of Twitter where the API was actually accessible. But one of the challenges with Blue Sky is there's certain aspects of Blue Sky you have to be a developer to build, to build feeds, which are really difficult. And so we have a startup here in our community who is basically simplifying the development of feeds so that it's like click button to get your feed built and to share it and all that kind of thing. So you can look for areas where implementing the open source tool is too difficult, which is where Automatic went. They went like, keeping this up to date is a nightmare. Pay us and we'll do it for you and we'll host your site and all that kind of thing. So look for those bright spots where it's like, this is really hard for users. This is valuable for them to pay for having somebody else do it. And I think that'll help you kind of figure out where the right spots to be proprietary are.
Thank you.
That's really good. It's actually, funny enough, we have a startup in the community that's built on Blue Sky.
Oh, nice.
So
right on.
Yeah, so it's quite cool. I've learned a lot actually from our community about all these things. And funny enough, what Raphael asked you is very connected to what the question I had, which is about business model evolution. And an open source business model evolution is a big part of what we're seeing. So I was just curious, having seen these, like, you've seen with subscription, before that, even looking at different revenue models, what do you think is what we can learn from even back in the .com days, so that we do not face the same fate as AI?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's been super interesting. I think the greatest thing that changed from, and it's almost come full circle, is when I started in startups, everything was per seat pricing. It was like one user cost this much, two users cost twice that. Like it was all just single seat sales. And then kind of the advent of SaaS and everything became subscription. And now people are like, I have 1,000 subscriptions. I'm not going to sign up for yet another subscription. The one thing, regardless of the business model, that I think is super challenging to think through is, how do you get people to pay for the value of your product without eliminating the way that people can engage with your product? And there's a product from way back. This is a very dated reference, almost as dated as books for Amazon, but I'm old, so all of my analogies are old. So there was a company called 37 Signals. They built a product called Basecamp, which was a project management tool. And the most interesting thing they did with that is, instead of saying per seat licensing, saying whoever wants to use this project management tool needs to pay for it, they said an organization pays by project. So you can have 3 projects for this price, you can have 10 projects for this price. And why that was so prescient and transformative was I could have 1,000 people on one project. I could have 1,000 people exposed to Basecamp and all the benefits that tool brought without them having to pay for it. So it almost had this organic adoption of people who are like added to a project and then are like, why aren't we using that? But if they had been gating it by the users, they never would have had that level of reception because not enough people would have been exposed to the product itself. So think through what you're offering, think through what you're charging for, and make sure you're not establishing a business model that charges for eliminating access to some of the value you provide, or else you'll never be able to grow as rapidly as you would like to.
Thanks so much, Rick. That's awesome. I think with that, everyone, we can just thank Rick for his time and for an incredible hour and a quarter. Very educational, lots of learning, lots of inspiration. We hope to have you again, Rick, anytime you want. This is there's a hungry community to learn from you.
Yeah, happy to do it. It's always my pleasure. And again, I realize what you're doing is hard. I realize I say some of these things off the cuff where it's like, oh, just do this. Like, but it's really challenging and really tough. So like, keep at it and just best of luck on everything you're all pursuing.
Thank you so much. And everyone, thank you for joining us. And as you say goodbye, please check out all the shout outs people have been putting in the messages. It's really good to see everyone talking about themselves and sharing, because this is how a community comes together and supports each other to success. So thank you again, and welcome to 2025. So Rick, while people disappear, I might pick your brain.
Yeah.
So it's I mean, it's been quite interesting. So like one thing that I've been having to think about a lot. So I'm an old school founder. I'm all about sleeping on floors, pushing the pain, you know. And there's for the past 10 years, there's been a lot of work-life balance conversations, which I think is fair, which is very important. But as a founder, you know, it's refreshing to see Eric Schmidt say, "You're not really a founder unless you're killing it." I'm curious what you think, because you know I've got a bias when people say that, because I'm just validating myself.
Yeah, it's a great question. Like we could never find the right source of funding for this project, but we had actually developed an experiment that was going to involve having mental and behavioral health services available for founders in our program to figure out if that made them more successful or made them more resilient or those kind of things. One of the challenges is exactly what you described. People who've been through it are like, oh, I went through it and I survived, so you can do it too, kind of thing. And I think, you know, to me, you're a founder if you so I have this challenge with like startups and small business in the US. They conflate the two. Like, and to me, a startup is something wholly different than a small business. You can be an entrepreneur, but you're not a founder building a startup necessarily. It's like all squares are rectangles, but not every rectangle is a square. So for me, a founder is somebody who's building a product-based business, often enhanced by technology, that has the potential for rapid exponential scale. So if you're building something like that, whether you choose to pursue venture capital, whether you choose to take it to that exponential scale or not, if you're building something that matches that, then you're a founder. You can be an entrepreneur doing whatever, but you have to be focused in that way, in my opinion, to be a founder. And then, yeah, I'm pretty open to like people exploring that space and, you know, being founders. But I do also have to admit that we've gotten to a day and age where people like being called founders. They like putting founder on their LinkedIn or co-founder or whatever. And it's become a moniker that has probably lost some of its luster over time as it's become more commonly accepted to do that pursuit. And I mean, they're both positive and negative aspects to that the world of startups has become more accessible and more people calling themselves founders. But I'm pretty broad with my definition of what a founder is and what they should be or could be going through.
I guess again, as we slowly bleed, but I think we're also helping retention here. But so bootstrapping and relationship with equity. So understanding the psychology of what equity should mean to the founder. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah. You know, I could wallpaper several rooms of my house with the stock certificates I have that are worth absolutely nothing. So like, I tend to be a little squishy on equity. Like, I think there's, especially if you're first-time founders or have first-time founders on your team, I totally am like, give the people the equity who are delivering the value to the organization. I think like high level, there is no 50-50 split. Like someone has to own the bigger chunk of the company, and they're the people who have to make the final decisions. But how you divvy that up is up to you. And then the other part that I don't think a lot of founders realize is like that equity distribution will change based on the first funding you take. If you decide to go down that path, you're going to recapitalize and move shares around and sell part of your shares to investors and keep part of them. And some of them are going to wind up in an option pool so you can give them to employees and that kind of thing. But I think, you know, it's important to feel like you are compensated for the value you're bringing to the organization. I think it's up to you as a founder to decide like what part of equity is most valuable to you. If I could go back to like young Rick, pre-beard Rick working in an early stage startup and forego stock options in favor of cash, I would totally do that right now, knowing what I know these days. But you know, it's always important that you feel a sense of ownership and you have the level of control in a business that you feel is on par with what you're giving them. So yeah, I feel like that at the highest level, just don't make it a 50-50 split and ensure that everybody is being compensated fairly. That Blue Sky company I was talking about, like they were wrestling with this and it wound up being like a 60-30-10 split for the founding team because they felt it was the technical stuff that was the true value of the company. So the technical lead got more of the company than anybody else. So I think you just need to be honest with yourself and your co-founders. Again, have this conversation while everybody's happy. This is not a conversation you want to be having when there's friction or conflict in your organization. Like get it dialed in sooner rather than later. And then, yeah, it'll all change later on. But make sure you're happy with it to begin with.
Cool. Do you mind if I ask, let Saba ask a question?
Sure, that's fine. Yeah, I've got time.
Thank you so much. Forgive me, I'm on a bus right now, so if we lose connection, it'll come back quickly. I have a question a little bit on from the aspiring VC perspective. So I spend a lot of time in PitchBook right now, just getting familiar with the different round sizes and trying to understand cap tables a little bit better. I just had a couple questions around one. I was taking a look at a couple companies and I saw a lot of conflicting signs around round sizes decreasing with each subsequent round, and wondering if that's a bad sign, a good sign. Another round, like the share price remaining flat with each round as opposed to increasing. And then the last, which is around just the amount of equity owners and employees have retained after each subsequent round. Are there any sorts of rules of thumb or is this really all just industry and company specific?
Great question. Yeah, I mean it's pretty specific deal by deal. I think a rule of thumb is like you're generally selling off 20 to 40% of your company when you're taking a round, and that kind of goes. I think what you're talking about with round sizes or pricing is dynamics of the macroeconomic environment. It's a lot of people staying at the same price is called a bridge round. And so like when you've raised, but you're starting to run out of money, you may raise a bridge round on the same terms to get you more money in the bank to keep stuff going. Pricing at a lower share price is called a down round, and it's something that people will do to try and inspire investors to get on board and the fact that they're getting it cheaper. I think another aspect that's changed over my history is the non-priced round. So either through a convertible note or a safe, you're able to go out and raise money without establishing an actual value for your company. Now, everybody will say the cap is potentially the established value, but it's not technically the value of the company. Whereas in later rounds, which they call priced rounds, you'll see people actually establishing a particular value for the company and a value per share that people are purchasing. The other dynamics that come into play are there's like pro rata rights, which says I was an investor once, which means I get a discount the next time I invest on the share price that you're investing, or like the cap. Like that's another one where it's like I invest and your cap is 5 million, but by the time you go to your next investment round, the company is actually worth 10 million. I still get to buy those shares at what it would have been at 5 million. So I'm actually getting twice as much value for that stuff. So there are all kinds of weird dynamics to it. And from the founder perspective, the challenge is VCs do this stuff day in and day out. They see these terms every day. They recognize these dynamics every day. For you, it's like once in a while you're going through this process. So the power dynamic is really hard. Like they have both knowledge and capital to use as leverage against a startup. So it can be challenging in that regard. But Saba, if you haven't read it already, and this is for all the founders here too, there's a great book called Venture Deals that's like a Rosetta Stone for understanding like all the terms that people use and how they structure these agreements and all that kind of thing. So that might be a good read for you. And then, as I always like to remind people, like this model was developed for the whaling industry. So like if you really want to think about how the whole venture capital world is structured, it was based on hunting whales for blubber. So like all those dynamics are still at play. The startups are the whales, the VCs are the people funding the ships to go out and get the whales. So just understand that there are a lot of like aspects of VC that are less than ideal from a founder perspective, and just the more again back to research, like the more informed you can be going into those conversations either as a VC or as a founder, the better off you will be in the long run.
That was
I was going to
incredibly
just say,
helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
thanks, Rick. I was just going to say based on the Venture Deals book, it's the Techstar founders, right, who wrote Venture Deals, and they've also created a course with the Kaufman Foundation, which I did. It's really powerful, good course. I really recommend to everyone.
Yeah, it's great. Like because I don't do deals on a regular, like I reread it every 6 months just so I can remember all the terms and all that kind of stuff. So it's really good.
So on my side, guys, I have to leave this room, but I'm just going to switch off the video and pack. And by the time I'm packed, if you have any more questions for Rick, please go for it. But otherwise, I'm going to have to close. I'm sorry about that. And because I can see how awesome this is. We're going to do rock, paper, scissors between Simon and Jonathan. I'm joking. Go for it. Yeah.
Hey, I'm ready to play games. I love games. I guess first of all, you seem to have an absolutely astounding amount of information about this entire field.
I'm just old, dude. That's like, I've been around a long time.
Yeah, but most people don't keep track of it. Most people don't read books every 6 months to remind themselves. And it's really great to hear. But I guess a lot of what you've been talking about has been dedicated to software startups that are making things that you can throw together in a weekend, maybe, or at least part of it, and then push out with some good traction or whatever. I'm making a fairly complicated piece of technical hardware that requires a significant amount of data before it can start doing everything that I want it to do, or that it should be doing. And I can work very hard every day and pull up a bunch of stuff and go like, hey, I can design each cookie that I send out to a person by hand. And it takes a lot of work, but I am not going to be able to generate the sort of traction that I think VC people are looking for by doing that every day in, day out, and also have the time to do regular startup stuff. So as you said before, VC people want that traction. They want to see me saying, hey, I have 500 customers that are asking me for every day or whatever. I have been getting people to give me like requests for things. I have a list of requests, but that's basically a wait list, and it feels more like a vanity metric than it does anything real. So what would you suggest I do in this sort of a situation?
Okay, great question. And just for additional context, like I was talking a lot of software because of most of the class is software, but I also, have run an accelerator in partnership with Autodesk that is about manufacturing and, physical object kind of manufacturing, and also run an accelerator focused on traditional consumer products. So food and beverage, apparel, footwear, so I understand, totally empathize with where you are in that regard. I think the most important thing to remember is like VC is not the only way to fund this stuff. And in fact, it's only applicable to a very, very slim percentage of companies being built out there. So my advice would be, if I were in your shoes, it would probably be look at potential grant or non-dilutive opportunities related to custom manufacturing or food services or things along those lines. I don't know where you're located, but in the US, there's a non-dilutive federal fund designed to provide seed funding for US based startups, and there are other opportunities like that around the world that could have potential. Given that yours is an ingredient-based product, I might look into some potential collaboration, co-marketing, co-building agreements with one of the like take M&Ms. Like if people want M&Ms in their cookie, is there a way to partner with M&Ms to say, look, if you help fund some of this activity, then we're jointly developing this IP that's going to benefit us both in the long run, or it's going to increase your consumption or whatever. Like there might be some really interesting collaborations there. I would just get creative about it. Like take VC off the table completely, and just like, unfortunately, banks don't help anymore. There are things called CDFIs that have, at least in the US, that have different lending models designed for startups. They're basically organizations that are given money to invest in other companies, and they do so on a loan kind of interest-based basis. There may be some opportunities there. Look to accelerator programs, like especially ones that provide financing. There's no saying that once you've gone through one accelerator that you're done. Like I take as many opportunities as you can, so long as it's not creating chaos on your cap table. But that can be a good way to find some early stage financing to build things or get ingredients and that kind of thing. Those are just off the top of my head, but I would say I totally get it. Like if you don't have the capital to bootstrap and you're not a VC-shaped business, then what are you supposed to do other than just grind it out? And unfortunately, a lot of it is just like do things that don't scale, like keep grinding until you figure out where that opportunity is. But I would look at some non-dilutive opportunities that might be valuable for you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And
Yeah,
just for notes, I am in the US actually. I'm in California
cool.
right now.
Cool. Right on. Yeah, take a look at that stuff because there are plenty of grant opportunities and those who knows the US political environment, but most of the business mindy stuff like tends to do well during Republican administration. So I don't see any of that going away. But who knows? Come January 12th, what have oh well, look where we are. So but yeah, thanks for the question. Simon, did you have one more? Oh, we lost your audio again.
Oh yes, now.
There you go. Yep.
I had one before, but then I forgot it. I should have written it down. But it is what it is. So I don't think I
Yeah,
have,
no worries. You can always hit me up on LinkedIn or whatever, or if you're actively using the Microsoft for Startups Founders Hub, you also have access to the expert network, which I'm in there, but a bunch of other people are in there as well. That's all free. Use it as many times as you like. Because there are all kinds of people throughout the business that have all kinds of perspectives that might be helpful to you. So feel free to use expert network as well.
Thanks.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I had a very quick, but
yeah.
Wait, okay, I can, yeah. Just wanted your insight or suggestion, like when working on a startup which is solving particular vertical with a deep technology, right? While working on the technology, but because it takes certain amount of time, so when the founders are heads down working, creating that solution, by the time they are vetted with the solution, you see like another five other startups in the same space, but they may not even have a product like a working product or MVP, but they would have circulated the content and traction more like a pitch deck, right? So how do you recommend for the startup which is working technology oriented, who already has a product and deep tech to survive or compete in this kind of situation?
Yeah, that's at a high level, competition, while it can be stressful from a founder perspective, competition proves that a market exists. And like, no presentation you'll ever give about your startup should be devoid of content on the competition in the market. And because there's always it could be the status quo, or it could be other competing products in the market, but you always want to have competition in your marketplace because that proves you're on to something. I think, you need to figure out how to, granted your head's down, like you're trying to get things built, but at the same time, you need to hone in on just that initial target market that is going to be receptive to what you're building, despite all the noise in the marketplace with competition. It's just really critical that you carve out some time to begin identifying, researching, and getting in front of that, even if it's just a handful of people, that you're getting in front of that initial target market. Don't spend all your time just building things behind closed doors. The sooner you can get them in the hands of an actual user, the better off you will be. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much, Rick. I'm gonna have to close this out because I'm like really late. But this has been really fun, and I'm looking forward to our chat next week. But thanks everyone, and have a great one, and enjoy the rest of your day and week.
Thank you again.